I'm going to show you how to get the test statistic and p-value for chi-square goodness of fit test when the expected distribution is uniform. In other words, each outcome is expected to be equally likely. The example I'm using is testing whether or not a six-sided die is fair. So the expected outcome for each side is going to be the same. So in other words, each value 1 through 6 has a corresponding probability of 1 out of 6. So the die was rolled 200 times, and then the observed frequency or the observed counts for each outcome were 48, 30, 43, 41, 28, and 10 for values 1 through 6. I've already entered those into the first list. The null statement is that the distribution of outcomes is uniform. In other words, the proportion for a 1 is 1/6, for getting a 2 is 1/6, and so on. Versus an alternative is that the distribution is not uniform, and that would be the case where the die is loaded. To run the goodness of fit test, however, you need the expected counts. So what I can do for list 2 is first put in the expected frequencies for each category, and that's going to be 1 divided by 6 for each one. I can just put 1 over 6 for each outcome, and then the calculator will go ahead and convert that to decimal. That way you don't have to round. If you round too much in your calculation, if you do this by hand, your test statistic might be too far off from your answer or the correct answer. Whoops, I did something wrong here. Okay, I'm not sure what happened. Let me go down. I might have hit all right, let's try it again. Okay, that looks a little better. All right, so again, I can't run this goodness of fit off of this second list as my expected. I need to create a list of counts for list 3. So to do that, I can up arrow to list 3, press enter. It moves my cursor down to the bottom of the screen. The die was rolled 200 times, and if each outcome is expected to be equally likely, each expected count will be 200 times 1 out of 6. So I can just tell the calculator, take 200 and multiply it by list 2. All right, so the expected counts are all the same, and that should not be surprising. You want to press your stat key, arrow over to tests, scroll down or scroll up to goodness of fit. It's near the bottom. You want to tell it where your observed counts are, and those are in list 1. And the expected counts are in list 3. You can change that if you need to, but you definitely don't want to use list 2. You want to change the degrees of freedom, which is the number of categories or outcomes minus 1. So I have 6 outcomes. My degrees of freedom will be 5. And then calculate. The chi-square test statistic is 28.54, but the corresponding p-value of 2.85 times 10 to the negative 4th. That's a pretty small p-value, so we're going to be rejecting the null at all common levels of significance. So there is strong evidence to support the suspicion that this is not a fair die.